Hello there, welcome to the Weird Record Club, and in today's episode we're going to look at the psychedelic adventures of Charles Westover, also known as Del Shannon. So we're going to look at Del Shannon's psychedelic album from 1968. I've always been a fan of Del Shannon's early work. Of course, he had these early hits like Runaway and Hats Off to Larry, and his work stood out in that strange pre-Beatles world. You know, the pop songs that you got after the end of the rock and roll era, the first flush of 50s rock and roll, and before the beat era of the early 60s that the Beatles and the Stones, etc., ushered in. You had this strange world. Sometimes it's called prefab pop. You know, the sort of post-rock and roll but pre-beat era. And Del Shannon's work stands out a mile. I think partly because it's of the themes of his songs often have this haunted, hunted, dark, brooding feel to them. Of course, they often have the theme of being on the run, Runaway being a classic example, but Keep Searching and Stranger in Town often follow these. Now, as well as that, musically you had Del Shannon's soaring falsetto, which sounded great, and you also had Max Crook, who co-wrote a lot of Del Shannon's songs, and he played a self-invented instrument called the Musitron, and that a kind of primitive synthesizer. So all these give Del Shannon's early work a real interest compared with other prefab pop. Anyway, 1967, 1968, the psychedelic era, Del Shannon released this album here. This is a reissue. It's quite hard to find the original one, but this is The Further Adventures of Charles Westover. Charles Westover, of course, is Del Shannon's real name. This is what he says on the sleeve notes. Why Charles Westover? But then, why Del Shannon? In Hollywood, truth and illusion, reality and fantasy, sometimes, most of the time, get quite confusing. The intention of this album is not to confuse, but to illuminate the problems of being a real person and a pop star. So if you want to know what it's like to be a real person and a pop star, this is the album for you. In another place, at another time, Charles Westover became Del Shannon. In this album, the reality of Charles Westover emerges. So, given that, what do we get in this Del Shannon's psychedelic album from 1968? Well, you get quite a lot of sunshine pop. Gone are the falsettos. Gone is Max Crook and his Musitron. You get, instead of very contemporary sounding for 1968, psychedelic, orchestral, baroque, all those kinds of things. There's bits of sitar floating in here and there as well. So in comparison, it's quite English sounding, so it sounds maybe a little bit like Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies, so that gives you an idea of what it's like. So, and there wasn't a hit on this album, although a number of singles were released. Anyway, you get perhaps the standout tracks here. I Think I Love You, very Zombies sounding with its, but also full of sitars. Colour Flashing Hair, which reminds me a lot of She's a Rainbow by the Rolling Stones. And there's quite a lot of Rolling Stones influence here, especially the era between the Buttons and Satanic Majesties, that kind of psychedelic and proto-psychedelic era of the Stones, and that seems to have had a very big influence on him. Del Shannon did a cover version of Under My Thumb on one of his previous albums as well. So those are the standouts, I think, on side one. Side two is great. There's Gemini, again, another sort of psychedelic feel. The one Conquer, which seems to be about conquering depression, has some poignancy given what eventually happened to Del Shannon. Magical Music Box, again another standout with a very psychedelic music box feel. And perhaps the best one, the only song not to be written by or co-written by Del Shannon, is the final one, New Orleans. That may be the one you should check out on YouTube if you want an insight into this record. And that's very moody. It's got a very spooky psychedelic long fade out with sound effects and so on. So again, it's really interesting to see how Del Shannon approached the psychedelic era because, like I've said with other albums in this series, in this playlist, unlikely psychedelia, unlikely delia, as you might call it, sort of records made by bands who you don't associate with the psychedelic era, who sort of tried psychedelia on for size, and sometimes you get some nice surprises. So Del Shannon's early work is brilliant, and I think this is a worthy addition to it. Now, a lot of Del Shannon compilations and best-ofs don't include anything from post 65 or 66, which is a real shame because this should be part of this album should be part of the Del Shannon catalogue. So if you're looking for a taster for what this is like, I would say the songs to check out are New Orleans, Colour Flashing Hair, Gemini, Magical Musical Box. All those give a flavour of the kind of things to find that you'll find on this album. So tragically, Del Shannon took his own life in 1990. He shot himself, and there's been a lot of suspicion that his suicide may have been connected with his being prescribed Prozac. His wife said that this was totally out of the kind of expected behaviour from him, and he was planning a tour and a new album. So that being said, I think of all the sort of unlikely delia that we've looked at, this is one of the best ones. So Del Shannon Goes Psych gets a big thumbs up from me. What do you think? Have you heard this album? And I'll see you soon.